Welcome to the Saffron Production webinar. And I think it'd be best if people hold their questions until after all the presentations have been made. Plan is for those to go for about a half hour, so there'll be plenty of time for Q&A. And in the meantime, please keep your microphones muted. And we'll turn it over to the first speaker. Margaret, are you going to do introductions? Or we'll go right to Arash. Who's the first speaker?
Yes, I'm here. Okay, thank you everyone for being here today. I hope you all are doing well and safe. My name is Arash. I'm a faculty at UVM, and in the next 10 minutes, I am going to talk about very basic information about saffron. What is saffron? What is good for? I know lots of you are familiar with saffron, but actually this introduction is for the people that they are not. So after I finish my presentation, we will have Patty and Brian. They are saffron producers in VT, and they are here with us to share their information and knowledge and experience about saffron production in VT and New England climate. So let me start with this question. What is saffron? Saffron is dehydrated or dry stigmas of Crocus sativus flower. Crocus sativus is a fall-blooming crocus, and saffron is well known as the most expensive spice in the world. The retail price is like $25 per gram to $75 per gram for local product. I mean, American grown saffron. So it is expensive. As I said, it is a fall blooming crocus. That means it produces like flowers in October and November in fall. So if you have, maybe you say like, we have crocus, fall blooming crocus in our backyard. Please don't eat it before you get sure that it is saffron, because we have like 80, 90 different crocus species, and some of them, they are very toxic. Another question is, what is saffron good for? Saffron is delicious. As I said, we cook with it. It's a spice. So, but it has some other functions like pharmaceutical effects, anti-depression, anti-carcinogenic effect. It has some companies produce some medicine with it. It's used as a natural source of color for dye, and if you have not tried saffron liquors, you should do that. They're like delicious. Why saffron is expensive? It's a big question that usually people ask. Saffron is expensive because inherently is a valuable product. I said it has anti-carcinogenic effect, anti-depression, and is a medicinal plant. But on the other hand, to produce saffron, we need laborers, we need handworks. It takes time, it takes lots of work to do before we produce it. To produce a gram saffron, we need 150 to 200 saffron flowers to pick up and then separate the stigmas. All these procedures are like time-taking procedure. And don't forget that saffron has a low yield compared to other conventional crops. On average, it has a yield around 4 to 5 pounds per acre, which is really low. So, where is the origin of saffron? It's a good question. Actually, there's a competition between the countries to say saffron is from our place, but we don't know where is that from exactly. We know that it's from a place that you can see on the map, somewhere around the Mediterranean region to Iran and India. You know, as in Iranian people, I like to say it's like a Persian crop, but technically it is not. There is some evidences showed like saffron can be from the Mediterranean region, but for sure is like somewhere around that area. We know that the first saffron farm established 3,500 years ago in Mesopotamia. And recently they found a depiction in Iran is like, that one is like 50,000 years old, and they could find saffron pigments on that depiction, which is really cool. You know, just think about that number, 50,000 years old. Where is the saffron producing regions in the world? Iran produces 90% of global saffron production. India, Greece, Italy, Spain, Morocco, they are famous in production of saffron recently. Afghanistan and China are between the saffron producers globally. As you see in the picture, we also have Canada and United States as a place or places that they are famous in saffron production. Not famous, but they produce saffron or are producing saffron. So when I came here like 5, 6 years ago, we started the project. I thought that uh, saffron is like we are the first group that are producing saffron, but that was not right because saffron, Amish and Mennonite family brought
Go
saffron
down the
years ago.
volume thing here.
I think
So,
I don't
somebody
know.
could mute themselves,
Where
please.
has a little speaker?
so I go ahead with the presentation.
Press this.
So, anyways, the Amish and Mennonite families brought the saffron 300 years ago to Pennsylvania. Her farm in Pennsylvania, and the thing that you see in the picture on her hand is like saffron extract, and she said like, I'm taking that as a medicine for my eyes, which is great. Like consuming saffron and producing saffron is part of their culture. And actually, we know some growers in Canada that they are producing saffron.
Isn't there a
So
volume button on this?
another big question was, is there any market for saffron in the United States or not? At this point, I can say all the growers that I know, at least most of them, they could sell the products here. But I collected some data and to illustrate how is the saffron market big. How big is that? In 2013,
Keep turning it just a
United
little.
States imported 23 tons of saffron. In 2016, we imported 46 tons of saffron. And in 2018, we imported 60 tons of saffron. That means like there's a huge market. Where is that exactly? I don't know. But we are talking about 60 million grams of saffron. So how is the saffron life cycle? Saffron, when we want to produce saffron, we have to start with the saffron corms, not bulbs. We plant the corms. As you see in the picture in the left down side of the slide, we start with those corms. When we want to start, we plant those corms in August to mid-September. And after like 40, 50 days in mid-October to mid-November, we will have the flowers, is the blooming season of saffron. After the blooming season, we will have the green leaves during the fall and winter. And in the climate like this climate, the leaves are covered by snow during the cold seasons. And then when the weather gets warmer, in summer, the plants will be dormant. That means we don't have green leaves on the ground anymore. But the things that we have is like dormant or slept corms under the ground. Saffron is a perennial crop. The mother corms that we planted last year will be die after a year, after actually not a year, 6, 7, 8 months. And the baby corms that are produced or formed on the mother corm will be responsible to continue our production for the next years. Saffron producers keep the corms for 2, 3, 4, 5, even 6 years in the ground. So when you are a saffron producer, you actually have 4 different products: saffron stigmas, the red color product that you see on the upper right side of the slide. You produce saffron corms, you produce saffron petals, and you produce saffron stamens. I don't know about the market for stamens and petals in United States, but I'm definitely sure that there's a market for saffron stigmas and saffron corms in US. Another aspect of saffron production is saffron quality for the professional consumers, especially, and pharmaceutical companies, maybe. When we are talking about saffron quality, we are talking about the color of saffron, the taste of saffron, and the smell or flavor of saffron. Pyrosin, picropyrosin, and safranol are those chemical components that play a role in quality of saffron. And higher concentration of those chemicals means higher quality for us. So
How do you turn it up?
okay.
Yes.
So okay, cool. Don't forget, I said saffron is the most expensive product or crop or spice in the world, but at the same time, it is the most adulterated crop in the world. That means lots of producers, not producers, sellers, sell something else instead of saffron. They mix saffron with other things like safflower and sell it. So be careful. I'm pretty sure Margaret Skinner, who is with us today, she is actually my boss. She has some funny stories that can share with us about that thing. But be careful when you go and order saffron. Just get sure that you are not ordering safflower. It's definitely another species. And again, lots of products are fake and is a huge issue. And actually, this situation about the adulteration or fake saffron gave us this opportunity to introduce our product, American product, as a reliable source of product here. So I know in 10 minutes I cannot cover all the aspects of saffron production. I stay here for the second 30 minutes to answer your questions, but I want to mention that we have shared lots of information, fact sheets in our website. Please check our website. You see that on the screen, on your screen right now. And if you are not member of SaffronNet or Saffron Leaser, please send an email to Margaret Skinner and join us. We have saffron producers from all over the place in the group, and we share our information together. Please be in touch, and I think is Brian's or Patty's turn to start their presentation. I'm done at this point.
Thank you so much. You do have some questions coming in the chat, but we'll take them after Patty and John. Take it away.
Well, you just have Patty today. John's working in the field. So we are wholesale growers of trees and shrubs, have been in the nursery business for over 35 years. That's where John is today. We actually do a bit of a good business in the fall. So I was at an integrated pest management meeting that Margaret had, and that Margaret had put on, and learned a little bit about saffron that they were doing, and it really piqued my interest. Um, the other thing that Margaret was showing was that they were trying to extend people's use of their high tunnels during off seasons. And since we don't grow anything in high tunnels, I also heard from a Mennonite man who had been growing saffron in the ground in both Massachusetts and Maine. And that really piqued my interest. And John and I decided that if we were going to give this a try, we would do it in the ground because that's what we know how to do. And we thought we'd give it a try. When I say it piqued my horticultural interest, I will say that it's really not very intuitive, this crop. To think that it's dormant all summer and has foliage all winter is just really made me think, how in the heck is that going to work here in Vermont? So that's what made us decide to give it a try. Next slide. So in 2017, in August, we purchased 2,500 corms from Roco. And I would say it cost us maybe a little over $1,000 for that purchase that year. And we went ahead and got the larger organic, although we are not certified organic. We haven't used any sort of pesticides or fertilizer on these plots. So we wanted to start out with some nice corms. Next. Okay, so we have 200-foot long beds. They're 3 feet across with about a foot and a half aisle in between the beds. Slightly raised, which John did with the tractor tiller and kind of piled them up a bit. We definitely planted 6 inches deep, wanting to go deep, knowing that the corms tend to come up a little as they grow. And we wanted to make sure that in our hardiness zone that they were deep enough. This we did plant a little bit more here in 2020, and I will tell you we decreased the width of our bed because it's I'm not a very tall person, and it was we found both of us for harvest it's kind of hard to reach across, and so we made our beds just a little narrower in 2020. And just so you know, it's we spent a lot of time bent over in the planting process. Next slide. After we planted the beds, we mulched. We happened to have a lot of wood chips. That's what we were using. So we put wood chips all the way around the beds. In 2017, we did have some problem with rabbits. So we just put some netting over the beds. You can see there's a little bit of damage on the lower right-hand slide showing you some rabbit damage. So we went ahead and put some netting, just some hoops and netting over these beds. So this would have been 2017. We planted in late August. This looks like it was probably, I'm going to say, somewhere in October. Foliage has come up. Didn't get many flowers the first year. Next. These are slides from a site visit that folks came to at our nursery to kind of take a look at our operation, see what we were doing. And this all had to do with weed management. So when do you manage the weeds? Whenever there's foliage up, you are managing the weeds. So the tools on the right are several things that we would use, and we believe in keeping it fairly clean beds. The interesting thing is once the foliage dies down, which is going to be about mid-June, there's no more foliage, and the corms are dormant. So we went through with a flame weeder, which you see right there, the propane tank. You mount it on like a backpack, and you can it puts a torch out. And we cleaned up our beds in late June. Foliage was dead. Went in, cleaned up with the weeds, and instead of having to weed like we did in 2017 all summer long, we put some weed fabric, which I'll show later on, to keep suppress weeds through the summer when they're dormant. Next slide. Harvest time. So foliage starts coming up. We just checked our beds recently, and nothing has poked up through the soil, but there is some action. They're starting to grow. So just about, I'm going to say at the end of this month, we're going to start seeing foliage, and flowers start mid-October and go for about a month. It is good to pick in the morning. Best to get the flowers before they're totally opened up. And we did deal with frost in our area by the time mid-November comes. We've had a lot of frost, but have found these flowers to be totally frost hardy, especially when the stigma is enclosed in the petals. They're just fine. Next slide. So this is, all in a day's harvest here. We go out in the morning, harvest, try to keep them not too thick, a few layers thick, protect them from the sun. I have a cool spot that I put them in while I'm processing. I think I'm not supposed to say processing, separating out the stigmas from the petals. And again, this is all bent over work in the field. Next slide. So this is where it all happens. We bring it into our kitchen where I have plastic laid out on the table. I try to run a really sanitary operation, washing our hands beforehand. Um, Spend a lot of time here sitting and separating the stigma, which if you look at the left photo, you can take a look. There's petals, stigma, and stamens. And we are, at this point, we're not marketing anything except the red stigma. I think that since a little of this is making it up as we go, I'm not sure that I need to be quite so careful separating all my stigmas on the trays for the food dehydrator, as you see. I don't know the answer to that question. My gut feeling tells me if I pile them up really high, they won't dry as evenly. So I tend to keep them from touching on the trays. And I have a 4-tray, just a home food dehydrator that I put them in. How long and at what temperature is sort of one of those trade secrets, I think, in a way. There's and there isn't a lot of research on it. Lately, I've been doing 158 degrees Fahrenheit for about 12 to 15 minutes. I'm looking for them to be how do I say it? Not overcooked so that they shatter, but crispy and not bendy. So a lot of subjective, just taking it out and seeing how it looks. Next slide. This actually this is a little overstated here on the 90 to 100 grams. I actually get about 70 grams a year for the last couple years. But this is what it looks like. This is how I store it, and then I put it in actually have a black cloth box that I put it in a cool, dry place in my house when I get ready to sell it. But that's what it looks like when you have a pint of saffron. Next slide. Yeah, one of the big problems is moles and voles, and I will just have to knock on something. We've been fairly lucky that we haven't had a real problem. We have a lot of chipmunks on our property, but they haven't bothered this so far. We keep any kind of grassland around mowed very short, and we have not planted any hardware cloth or anything, and we have set up some traps. Yep, that's and cold hardiness. I will say in 2018, in November, there were some really cold nights. We probably had several nights that were 15 to 20 degrees below zero, and it didn't affect the corms. So we're finding them to be very hardy in the field with snow protection. We've been fairly lucky to have snow protection. We have some overwintering cloth that we used to use in our nursery that if we were really concerned and it was bare ground and got to 20 below, we might roll those cloths over the beds. Next slide. Yeah, this is what we've been using the last 2 summers for summer weed management, and it's just been the ticket. We used to grow container plants, and we have this porous cloth, ground cloth left over from that. So we wondered, well, what would it be like? It's porous, the rain can come through. We would suppress the weeds for the summer, never have to weed like we did in 2017. And this has just been, it worked great last year. And so far this summer, we don't see any problems. We looked underneath, it's moist underneath. Maybe in a hotter climate like Arizona or down south, the black cloth might be a problem with heat, but has not so far been any kind of a problem for us. And boy, is it nice not to have to weed those beds. And yep. Oh, one more. Yeah, so we did dig up, next slide. We dug up some corms and replanted in a new bed this year, and some new corms. And Arash had turned us on to the tip of pre-digging the holes with an auger instead of having to stick your trowel in and wave it back and forth, which can be really hard on your wrist after a while. So the auger tip worked great. You just, John would do the holes, and I'd come along behind and drop the corms into the hole and cover them up. So I think that's the end of my presentation.
Great. On to section 3.
Yeah, hi, this is Brian Levin here. I started, I think, about the same time as Patty in 2017, following on the inspiration from UVM and the work that Arash and Dr. Skinner did to at least demonstrate that growing saffron in Vermont could be possible. And I went the route of building a high tunnel. And so if we flip to the next slide, I can show you well, this must have been our first winter after the high tunnel was built. It's a large one. I built a 96 by 30 foot high tunnel. Around this time, I actually put in an application for the NRCS grant, which funds the cost of the materials for a high tunnel. And after I finished building this one, I was approved for that grant, and I now have 2 of these same size out in my field. And it's a pretty spectacular grant program, one worth looking into. They do fund them almost the entire cost of the materials to build one of these, and for any size. And I think it's still a viable grant program, last I checked. We can go to the next slide. You can give our first winter's view from inside. Inside I built 5 framed raised beds, and the subsequent slides I'll get into a little more detail for how they're constructed. But this can give you just a little insider's view of what wintertime in the hoop house can look like, and the green foliage that you actually get to see all winter long. Unlike if it's out in the field and it's covered in snow, you have to wait till spring for the snow melt to see all your foliage. But it continues to grow all winter long. I think this was fairly early winter when we did a site visit that preceded the annual UVM workshop conference last March. The foliage was considerably longer, stretching over the beds down to the floors, and so it does continue to grow all winter long. If we go to the next slide, I can get into a little bit more detail on how I constructed these beds, and some of the lessons learned too, I think, have been valuable for now that I'm onto my second one. As you can see here, I framed, it's all a wooden frame. This was cedar or hemlock. I'm trying to remember. I think this first hoop house I used cedar wood, which wasn't as expensive then, but it is now. And my second hoop house I used all hemlock, which was considerably cheaper, although quite a bit heavier, certainly. So what I did after, or actually before I put the wooden framing down, I laid down a 1/4-inch hardware cloth, which you can see to the left of the picture, and then covered that with a weed cloth that I placed the frame on, and I used a rebar to basically shore up the sides of the frame so that when I put all the soil in, the walls didn't cave outwards. In hindsight, I really probably would have been easier just to weed cloth the entire hoop house, and because I eventually put weed cloth down in between the beds, to obviate the need for having to weed in between the beds. The high tunnel has really been great for the weeding that I've had to do is fairly minimal, and it's offered really good protection from a number of pests, particularly deer, who are very eager to get at the green shoots, early on in the spring once the snow's melted and there isn't anything green out yet. So having them in the high tunnel keeps the deer away. The hardware cloth has been really effective for keeping burrowing animals, groundhogs. I did have a groundhog in my hoop house I guess my second summer, but he wasn't able to dig up into the beds, and eventually he moved away, I guess. If we go to the next slide, I can just show you a little bit more of the evolution of building these beds out, having all 5 frame beds. And this is a great picture of a big lesson learned for me. There is about 1.5 to 2 feet space in between each of these beds, But I will say that I was very excited once they were in there, and then I had the realization that now I had to get the soil into the beds, and this was a hard task, mainly just with wheelbarrows at this point. From that lesson, I've learned up to now build a single bed and fill it with soil, then build another bed and fill it with soil. This is with my small tractor that I can do. So everything's proceeding much more quickly in the new high tunnel, but this is the process I went through for the first one. If we go to the next slide, we can see a little bit more. What I did is I loaded in about 3 or 4 inches of topsoil compost mix into each of these beds. And then if we move to the next slide, it made planting
that Arash and Margaret are doing.
Considerably easier, and being able to lay out these corms in one big grid, essentially. Is there a question there?
Tomorrow. Good.
So after planting all of the corms, and then I filled in the topsoil on top, and these were the first shoots to pop up through. It was obviously an exciting site. I will say that I had a little bit, or I had a few too many corms to plant all in my hoop house, so I did plant some in one outdoor bed, which was fairly successful for a few years, but I found that keeping up with the weeding and keeping the deer and other pests off them, really this bed was taking more of time than most of the others. So having the new high tunnel, I built a single bed in there. When this past summer, along with my son's help, we transplanted all the corms from the outdoor bed into a much larger bed indoors. So I have some new transplants. If we go to the next slide, I can introduce you to my security, which has been very effective, at least for keeping the mice out. Although mice still do I find little holes the mice bore in the soil every now and then. I guess when these guys are too well fed. Go to the next slide. And glorious harvest. I had to get one good harvest shot in there for you. And I will say, when it starts to flower, it's a pretty magical time here in Vermont too. We're usually looking at the tail end of the foliage season, but in general, a pretty beautiful time of year, and the flowers certainly complement that experience. And there's very few, if any, other flowers out at that time. So I think part of the advice of harvesting early in the day is to make sure that you get the first crack at the flowers, and because once they start to open up, the honeybees and the bumblebees like to climb inside and muck things up. And I've had, and then your picking process takes a lot longer, as you have to kind of flick each flower and make sure that the drunken bee falls out and stays out of your basket. Go to the next slide. I'll show you a little bit more about what I do once I've picked it. This is my evidence of my destigmatizing process, and you got the bowls full of petals and piles of the saffron stigmas. I think this was fairly early on. I was leaving a little bit extra of the yellowish to whitish part of the stigmas. I have since cut them off a little bit shorter than that to just show that most of the orange and reddish color of the stigmas. Go to the next slide. This is sort of daily piles. Although when the piles start to get big enough, I begin to actually go through the process of oven drying them this is as low as my gas oven goes, is at 150 degrees. But at that temperature, I'm able to dry a pile like this in 25-30 minutes. we go to the next slide, I can show you what I used for that drying. I had a local metalworks company in Morrisville, Vermont, made me this copper pan that is essentially the dimensions of my oven. So one of those piles spread out very, very loosely on it. It facilitates the drying process, and I find it dries things pretty evenly. So it's a nice little way to do it, and I found that the saffron quality has been fantastic. So it seems to be a successful process, and really you can dial up the right moisture level. Go to the next slide. And here's the part of the fruits of the harvest. I think in the last year I was up to 150 grams. So this is 2 or 3 of mason jars of this size. Probably about 3 mason jars of this size is all the dried saffron that I have from a harvest. Next slide. And I package it, and this is a gram container with my farm name and packaging information, a nice pretty sticker on top. I've found that this is a nice way to present it. It is recommended that dried saffron be kept out of direct sunlight, so a lot of packaging for saffron is more of an opaque container. I find that if you just take the time to keep it in a drawer out of the sunlight, and this allows you to see the product, and I find it's a beautiful spice to look at. So it helps with the marketing, I think, to have a clear glass container. Is that the last one? No, that's the last one. Beautiful flowers. It's a lovely process, and very grateful to UVM, to Arash and Dr. Skinner for started this process, and they're a phenomenal resource going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you. This is Vern. There's a lot of questions in chat we can get to, but I'd just like to start with, what do you sell your saffron for, and how do you find the market?
Well, I sell my saffron for $50 a gram. I also package it in quarter grams that I sell for $15. I sell a fair amount, an increasing amount through my website. So I take orders online and paid through PayPal. My biggest customers have been restaurants, though, that I cut a little bit more of a deal for, because they tend to buy it in larger quantities. Some local farm to table restaurants in Stowe and Waterbury have been my biggest clients, although with the reduction and the closing of the restaurants for an extended period of time this year, and now they've reduced the number of patrons they can serve. Sales to restaurants has certainly dipped in the last 7-8 months. Hopefully that'll come around again. But
Great. Do we have Arash and Margaret on the line? I was going to read through the
Can we, Vern?
Yes.
I think it would be nice to hear from Patty how she sells it, because she has a slightly different strategy.
Good idea.
Like Brian, I also sell to farm to table restaurants in the Burlington area, and they've been fairly steady customers. I don't know what will happen this fall. And I also sell to what I would call I sell wholesale to somebody who then packages it and sells it mostly in the Brooklyn, New York area. And so he does all the repackaging or packaging, because I don't do that. So unlike Brian, I'm not actually, I don't have any website. I'm not doing like a retail marketing. I would really prefer to just wholesale it. So I have established with a few restaurants in Burlington, and the rest through Lemon Fair, who buys wholesale from local producers and then does the marketing.
Just to add in, Lemon Fair, you can find more information about Lemon Fair on their website called Lemon Fair Saffron Company. Even though he sells the product that he gets from Vermont down in New York, he also he comes originally from Vermont, so he's sort of he's not a flatlander. So
No,
it's
and
been great.
he also has grows a little bit here in Vermont too, in New Haven.
Yep.
So Margaret, can you see the chat questions to raise, or should I ask
Yes,
them?
I can. Yeah, I can do it. Let's start with some from about Brian, because there were several questions to Brian. One was, what kind of temperatures do you have in the winter in your high tunnel?
Yeah, it's a great question, and they fluctuate dramatically because it's in the winter, the snowbanks pile up on the side. It's not really possible to roll up the sides to vent it. And on a sunny day, even if it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside, it could be 80 degrees inside the hoop house. So I've actually, a project I'm working on now is installing a couple exhaust fans to be able to move some of that hot air out. I think that it's my plants have at least a couple of years have gone a little too early into their dormancy, and I think that's because the temperatures have reached such high points that and when you get to March and you don't, and it's the nights aren't as cold anymore. I think it can get just too warm in there. So I'm hoping to be able to regulate that a little more effectively this winter.
And another question was, how many times do you water?
So I don't in the winter. I water, heavily. I've started watering heavily now. I'll continue to do that through the fall, and then as soon as I can turn my water back on, early April, I think was when I got it going this spring. I start hitting with water again.
It's worth mentioning. I think we went and visited his high tunnel back in March this year, and the comments that people had among the group was that the soil was very, very dry, and there have been some other growers that have grown inside greenhouses or high tunnels, and there are probably a couple of key times when you really need to water. And if you want large corms, and Hans can probably confirm this, but the corms put on density and volume in the springtime, and so you really potentially want the soil to be moist at that particular time, as well as right now. I know in Vermont, the soil is incredibly dry, and if we don't start getting some rain, I think it may be important to water to sort of start stimulating some growth at that time. Hans, do you want to say anything about that?
Let me unmute first. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I was just typing more, but I completely agree with you that watering is important, especially during the springtime, because this is the time when the daughter corms are being formed, and you want them to grow as much as possible. And this process usually lasts until the end of May. A good rule of thumb would be, I always say, keep watering until the foliage has turned completely yellow. After this point, no more watering is really needed, as the growing part has finished. So we usually say from starting like in springtime, starting like February until the end of May, watering is really important, because then you give the daughter corms plenty of watering to grow to a certain stage, and this will enhance your yields in the fall.
And so for those of you that maybe don't know who Hans is, he's the owner of Rocco Saffron, and he's calling in from the Netherlands, and all of his corms come from the Netherlands, and so they, needless to say, are experts when it comes to producing corms and tulip bulbs and stuff like that.
Okay, can I add something? Actually, Hans is the king of saffron corn. So, anyways, I think if you are in area like Vermont or New England, the corms have produced roots right now in the ground. If you feel like the ground is really dry at this point, don't hesitate. Go ahead and put the water on the crops.
Okay, good. uh, just one thing to add. If we don't get to all these questions today, we will compile them and send out the information to all the people on the list and also on SaffronNet. There was just one. There was one other thing that I was thinking about here. Well, I'll just go to this. Someone from Ohio was asking about whether the Vermont Agency of Ag allows for home dehydrating, and the answer is yes, as far as we are aware. And we do realize that there are some states where there is more regulation relative to drying herbs, etc. And I got an email recently from the USDA requesting information about how whether it is justified to exempt saffron and some of these other specialty crops. I haven't followed up on it, but I would like to think that we would be able to work with the USDA as the industry gets larger, that we would be able to prevail so that people can grow, small growers who are growing saffron only would be able to do it from home, but we're not there yet. Okay.
Margaret, let me answer another question about ISO regulation certification for the saffron quality. Actually, at this point, I don't know any labs that issue the certification ISO 3632 because the labs for issuing that certification needs to be certified. So at this point, we don't know them. I don't know what lab can issue that certification officially. But the fact is, lots of labs, they have a spectrophotometry machine and they can do the test for you. But again, I cannot introduce them to you because I don't know them. You can go and talk with them, with the labs that they have like spectrophotometry, and if they say, yes, we do the test, send the samples to them. We are at the chemistry department here at UVM are working on a new method to assess the quality of saffron, which is different from the ISO regulation certification method or assessing the quality method. So, yep.
Okay, another question. I'm kind of jumping around here. The best geographic location for saffron production as a row crop in the U.S. for corn production. I don't think we know yet. In my mind, and other people may have other opinions, but my feeling so far is the one thing you really shouldn't do is try to grow saffron in a heavy clay, poorly drained soil. The corms just rot. When I went to visit the Netherlands to see how they were growing corms there, their soil was absolutely beautiful. There was not one rock. The fields were flat, and it was absolutely beautiful soil. Is that the only place to grow it? No, there probably are lots of other conditions that are suitable. Probably as of 2015, nobody thought you could grow saffron in Vermont, and we've certainly proved that that is not true. So there's lots of new information to be generated, and right now you as growers are the ones that will be able to generate that key information. Okay. So pros and cons of growing in a hoop house in the ground versus hoop house in beds. I'm assuming well, I guess that's pretty self-explanatory. Are there people that are growing in a high tunnel without raised beds with wood? No. I don't think we know the answer to that. It's certainly less expensive to plant them directly in the ground. But then you have to deal more with rodents and woodchucks and those kinds of things.
Yeah, and when you plant them in the ground directly in the high tunnel, if you don't have an appropriate irrigation system, in the ground will be better because the moisture will be like the moisture content is higher in the ground compared to the raised beds. But if you have like irrigation system in your high tunnel is like a different story, and we don't have the answer for it.
Okay, so one of the questions was, if growing in the dry western states like California and you get new corms, do you start to water when you plant them in mid-September? Hans, do you have an opinion on that?
Sorry, Margaret, one more time.
So if the soil is really dry, whether it's in California or wherever it is, though admittedly in California you're talking about 100 degrees right now, but should they be watering their corms in mid-September after they plant the new corms?
What I really don't like, Margaret, is that planting corms with extreme high temperatures and then combine it with high humidity. I was in Italy a couple of years ago, and they did the same thing. It was like they planted the corms somewhere around this time, and it was like 90 Fahrenheit. And right after planting, they had a heavy rainfall, like really heavy rainfall, and the water did not drain away. So the complete crop just went bad. They started to rot. So as long as you can provide sufficient drainage to your soil, it's fine for me to give it a drink after planting. But if that's not the case, I would not go for it, especially not combined with extremely high temperatures.
Okay, good. I wanted to give Aerobloom a chance. So they have a couple of comments here. They're interested in starting an aeroponics trial. You want to talk about that just a little bit? That's sort of a totally different approach to planting saffron.
Sure. This is Shiro Onodera, and I'm actually in Tennessee, but Aerobloom is based out of California. And so we grew out of the cannabis industry, but we're trying, because cannabis is paying the bills and everything, but we're trying to be crop agnostic and also go after high value crops. And we spoke with Dr. Arish the last month, I believe, and it just really, after that conversation, it just really allowed us to figure out which crops made the most sense. And in the Coachella Valley, there's plenty of sunlight, and the desert climate kind of resembles those in Iran. And we decided, hey, so one of the things that we were interested about was the water, the amount of water that the plants would receive. And I learned so much today, and thank you, University of Vermont, for putting this on. So we know now when it's most crucial to start watering. But we also saw that so many people were bending over, and and growing up in Tennessee, bending over in clay soil and harvesting fruits and especially like watermelon and stuff like that, it's no fun. So our systems are built to, or are going to be built to raise the beds up so that the cultivation can happen at a back-friendly height. I also used to work for OSHA, and I hate seeing people with back problems that can be prevented. So, do we have all the answers? No, but I've been getting messages saying that people have seen videos from Iran and Afghanistan in Farsi, and we've seen them too. And do we think that we can replicate that? We're not going to go for quantity. We're going to try to produce high quality and see if it can be replicated down the line in a couple of years, and go for quantity that way. But right now, thanks to Dr. Arish's insight and his inspiration, we're moving forward. And if anyone would like more details, please shoot me an email, and I'll be happy to talk with you.
Okay, we almost have to be done. We got about 2 minutes maximum. I don't know if all of you are on SaffronNet or would like to be, but it's very possible to continue some of these conversations through that listserv. That's probably some of the easiest ways. That will certainly be the link to this recorded program will be offered on SaffronNet. So if you're not on it, why don't you get on it? There's probably 750 people now from all over the country and all over the world. And Vern and Becky, thank you so much for putting this all on. And I think we will probably do more webinars in the future, since who knows when we're all going to be able to get together.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, we'll post the webinar and also the slides on the Veg and Berry website, and you'll have the link to share that more broadly. Thanks, everybody, and have a great afternoon.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.